All too often, today's cuisine becomes tomorrow's food waste, but there's an organization that tries to convert a problem into a solution, in this case for food insecurity. The organization is called Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. To tell us how it works is the coordinator for the Greater Boston area, Dana Siles. Thank you very much for being with us, Dana.
Thank you so much for having us.
First of all, what got you interested in rescuing food?
Ironically, I'm a full-time event photographer. And after so many years of being in the business, I would photograph these wonderful days, and then I would all of a sudden see all of this yummy food getting tossed. And it was one of those things that was in the back of my mind for a long time, but eventually things that things that are at the back of your mind eventually work their way to the front. And eventually I decided to do something about it with a bunch of like-minded professionals in my industry.
Well, when I think about solving food insecurity, I think of, basic, no-frills food maybe, but cuisine. Why is cuisine so much a part of the solution here?
Well, it's interesting. There's an amazing amount of wasted food in the events industry, in the restaurant industry, prepared food in general. And it often gets overlooked. We have wonderful nonprofit organizations around here in Boston dedicated to picking up surplus fresh food, like Love and Spoonfuls. I'm a huge fan. But what I found was that prepared food was often getting overlooked, and this is nutritious food. So you have a lot of people who are, going to McDonald's for fast food on their way home from work, which is obviously going to increase the obesity rate, especially among their children, when instead they could have nutritious surplus prepared food. And we like to think of it as not food waste, but wasted food, or food that would be wasted if it's not used properly.
Well, I guess you want to go for economies of scale here too, because you don't want a few scraps every day.
Exactly.
I think you want a big hit.
Exactly.
So how does that work out?
Yeah. Well, the way Rescuing Leftover Cuisine is designed is we have two different models. One is regularly scheduled food donations and pickups. The other is emergency. Lauren Bassler runs the regularly scheduled food pickups. So in that case, we have wonderful local businesses like Pret, Dig In, and a few others who, let's say hypothetically, every Tuesday at 4 o'clock, our volunteers will go over to Pret, rescue tons of sandwiches, pretty much as many that will fit in their trunk, and bring it over to St. Francis House, okay? And I'm using this as an example. Then we have other donors, such as the Weston Boston Waterfront. They've been incredibly generous. They've donated about 1,500 pounds of food since starting September 1. And when they have a donation, anybody who is an emergency rescuer will get a text if they are within 4 miles of the establishment itself. And then they have the option to claim or ignore the pickup, kind of like Uber or Lyft.
Talk about the endpoints here. You mentioned St. Francis House as one of them, but what about some of the others?
We have Boston Rescue Mission on board. We have Rosie's Place. As a matter of fact, a lot of the food from the Weston Boston Waterfront does go to Rosie's Place, and they are always very grateful for the food because not only do they have a food pantry, but they also have a shelter. So there's a lot of good use. We also have Women's Lunch Place. We have the Huntington YMCA. We have Boston Rescue Mission. There's a lot of really wonderful local nonprofit organizations who are doing really good work with the food that Rescuing Leftover Cuisine is recovering. And we like to say that we're the bridge between the surplus food and those who need it, because very often, even though wonderful organizations like Boston Rescue Mission do have a driver, an amazing driver named Dennis, sometimes he can't always get there. So we're able to fill in those gaps so that they don't lose out on food if they have to choose between 20 pounds of potatoes or 20 plates.
Talk about the difference between the cuisine and the usual things that are there, the basics at some of these locations. Does it make a difference to the people who come in there and need shelter and food?
It makes a huge difference. As a matter of fact, I was recently talking to Sharon over at Rosie's Place. And she was telling me something that I always knew, but again, sometimes it has to go from the back of your head to the front. And what she told me was, very often, almost probably every day, some of their visitors who come in are people who work at the local hospitals. They're showing up for lunch in their scrubs. Okay, these are people who might have families to support, and spending $5 in their work cafeteria adds up over time. So they're able to get a complimentary meal. So the food that we are recovering is part of the food that they're eating. You know, it's not all of it, but it's accumulative. And, you know, there's a great saying, pardon me for not being able to quote it entirely, but basically change starts with getting the government, the businesses, and the public all involved in order to make a change. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to get everybody involved.
This has been the news. We're talking with Dana Siles from Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. Dana, talk about the middle part now, what the volunteers have to do, because it looks like there's sometimes you got to get them on short notice, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm humbled by the volunteers that Rescuing Leftover Cuisine has been able to recruit. I just think they are amazing people. So like I said, we have regular pickups and we have emergency rescues. The regular pickups, you know, our volunteers can sign up at their leisure. But obviously, if we're in a pinch, an email goes out and 90% of the time someone claims it. It's amazing. And then for our emergency rescuers, you know, they get that text, and if they're available, they'll do it. And basically what will happen is we'll have, you know, special instructions already laid out, like the directions of the establishment versus instructions on how to get to the loading dock. They'll go, they'll pick up the food, and then as that middle person, they know that they can't make any stops in between picking up the food and dropping it off at the designated location, which has already been planned. So they know before they even pick up the food where they're going to be bringing it to. And we base that on a few things. We base it on geography, because we don't want the food in a car for more than 3 or 4 miles, right? We don't want it to be more than 10 or 15 minutes because we need to ensure freshness of the food. That's obviously important, very important. Secondly, the demographic. Who is this shelter or soup kitchen serving? What one organization needs is not necessarily the same as another. And I think a lot of people mistake that. They'll say, oh, I tried to donate this food, but they wouldn't take it. Okay, it's because the people that they're serving need something specific. So we factor that into consideration. And also the time frame. You know, some shelters and soup kitchens, we can drop off from, you know, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Other ones, it's 2 p.m. until midnight. So we also factor that into the equation. So everything is pre-planned. We match it all together, and our volunteers know where to go, and they take it. They take pictures. It's actually, it's a wonderful thing to see. They're always very happy. Sometimes they bring their kids, which I think is just an incredible learning experience for children.
What do they take the pictures of exactly?
Well, first we do ask them to take a picture of the food itself, because that's how we measure our progress. So they take a picture, they log into their account, their RLC account, and that shows basically as a receipt as far as that pickup. And then other pictures they'll take will just be them with the staff of wherever they're picking up, or their car trunk full of delicious, nutritious, wholesome food. And on that subject of wholesome food, if you don't mind me steering for a second, I want to point out that the donation of surplus food is legal and safe and easy. And a lot of people overlook that. There is an act. It's called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. It was actually passed in 1996 by President Clinton. And what it does is it protects all good faith donors from civil and criminal liability issues when donating apparently wholesome food. So apparently wholesome meaning I would eat it myself, I would feed it to a loved one. I believe it is wholesome food.
So good you can take a picture of it. If people want to help out, what's the best way for them to follow up?
Best way to go is rescuingleftovercuisine.org/MA for Massachusetts. And there you will find a bunch of links if you want to receive food, if you're a nonprofit. If you want to donate food, maybe you're a business or a cafe or a hotel in the area, or if you would like to volunteer. We are actively seeking volunteers. My job is to make our small yet mighty branch a large yet mighty branch, or large and mighty branch, sorry. And you know what we want is to grow an army of volunteers ready to pick up food, so that when we do get donors, we're ready to go.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Dana Siles from
appreciated.
Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. We'll have more news in just a moment.